So when you have the conversation about sex, what you then do, and you dial this up or down depending on, the age of the child, but you say some variation of this. You go, darling, so we've just talked about sex, and you know how together we watch movies and videos and cartoons where things happen that aren't real. Well, there are also movies and videos about sex, and they're not real either.
Today, it is my great honor and pleasure to bring on Cindy Gallop, who's the founder and the CEO of Make Love Not Porn. Launched at TED in 2009, pro-sex, pro-porn, pro-knowing the difference. In 2013, she turned Make Love Not Porn into the world's first user-generated, human-curated social sex video sharing platform. Make Love Not Porn TV, socializing and normalizing sex in order to make it easier to talk about, to promote consent, communication, good sexual values, and good sexual behavior. Make Love Not Porn is spearheading the social sex revolution. The revolutionary part isn't the sex, but the social. And Cindy is raising the world's first sex tech fund. She speaks at conferences globally and consults, describing her approach as, I like to blow shit up. She says, I'm the Michael Bay of business. I absolutely love that. Cindy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Thrilled to be here.
So let's start at the beginning, because you were in advertising, if I understand that correctly.
That's right, yes.
So how did you get into the porn industry? Where did this idea come from?
Well, it's very important to stress, David, I'm not in the porn industry.
Right.
Make Love Not Porn is not porn. We are building a whole new category on the internet that never before existed, social sex. So that's what I'm doing.
Social sex. Okay.
Yep.
All right. How did that start?
Sure. So Make Love Not Porn was an accident, and I should say that everything in my life and career has always happened by accident. I've never consciously, intentionally planned anything. So I date younger men. They tend to be men in their 20s. And incidentally, just to contextualize that, David, I have never wanted to be married. I've never wanted children. I adore being single. I cannot wait to die alone. I don't even particularly want to be in a relationship. I date younger men casually and recreationally. And I'm very open about all of that deliberately because we don't have enough role models in our society for women and for men that demonstrate you can live your life very differently to the way society expects you to and still be extremely happy. And so I am, as I said, deliberately open about all of that. So, I began realizing 11 or 12 years ago now, through dating younger men, that I was encountering something that honestly would never have occurred to me if I had not encountered it so very intimately and personally. Okay. I realized I was experiencing what happens when two things converge. And I stress the dual convergence because most people think it's only one thing. I realized I was experiencing what happens when today's total freedom of access to hardcore porn online meets our society's equally total reluctance to talk openly and honestly about sex. When those two factors converge, porn becomes sex education by default in not a good way. So I found myself encountering a number of sexual behavioral memes in bed. I went, whoa, I know where that behavior is coming from. I thought, gosh, if I'm experiencing this, other people must be as well. I did not know that because 11, 12 years ago, nobody was talking about this. Nobody was writing about it. This was me in isolation as a naturally action-oriented person going, I want to do something about this. So 10 years ago, I put up on no money a tiny clunky website at makelovenotporn.com that in its original iteration was just words. The construct was porn world versus real world. Here's what happens in the porn world. Here's what really happens in the real world. I launched it at TED in 2009, became the only TED speaker to say the words, come on my face, on the TED stage,
yes,
6 times in succession. The talk went viral as a result, and it drove this extraordinary global response to my tiny website that I had never anticipated. Thousands of people wrote to me from every country in the world, young and old, male and female, straight and gay, pouring their hearts out. And I realized I'd uncovered a huge global social issue. And so I then felt a personal responsibility to take Make Love Not Porn forwards in a way that would make it much more far-reaching, helpful, and effective. But I also saw an opportunity to do what I believe in very strongly, which is that the future of business is doing good and making money simultaneously. I saw the opportunity for a big business solution to this huge untapped global need. And I used the word big advisedly, David, because even then, 10 years ago at concept stage, I knew that if I wanted to counter the global impact of porn as default sex ed, I would have to come up with something that at least had the potential one day to be just as mass, just as mainstream, and just as all-pervasive in our society as porn currently is. So I was thinking big right from the get-go because I knew that I could not be effective if I wasn't. So what I decided to do was, I always emphasize that Make Love Not Porn is not anti-porn because the issue isn't porn. The issue is that we don't talk about sex in the real world.
Agreed.
If we did, amongst a whole host of other benefits, people would then bring a real-world mindset to the viewing of what is simply performative, produced entertainment. And so that's why our tagline at Make Love Not Porn is pro-sex, pro-porn, pro-knowing the difference. And that's why our mission is one very simple thing, which is to help make it easier for every single person in the world to talk openly and honestly about sex. And to do that in two areas. A, in the public domain, and by that I mean parents to children, teachers to schools, everyone to everyone. But B, and even more importantly, to talk about sex openly and honestly privately in your intimate relationships. And the reason that's so key is because we don't talk about sex as a society, it is an area of rampant insecurity for every single one of us. We all get vulnerable when we get naked. Sexual ego is very fragile. People therefore find it bizarrely difficult to talk about sex with the people they're actually having it with while they're actually having it. Because in that situation, you're terrified that if you say anything at all about what's happening, you'll potentially hurt the other person's feelings, put them off you, derail the encounter, potentially derail the entire relationship.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you want to please your partner. You want to make them happy. Everybody wants to be good in bed. No one knows exactly what that means. And so you will seize your cues on how to do that from anywhere you can. And if the only cues you've ever seen are in porn, because your parents didn't talk to you about sex, because your school didn't teach you, because your friends aren't honest, then those are the cues you're going to take to not very good effect. So given this mission of talk about it, I decided to take every dynamic in social media and apply them to this one area no other social network or platform will go in order to socialize sex and to make real-world sex and talking about it socially acceptable and therefore ultimately just as socially shareable as anything else we share on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram. So 7 years ago now, my tiny team and I launched the first stage of this vision, makelovenotporn.tv, which is, as you've seen, an entirely user-generated, crowdsourced video sharing platform that celebrates real-world sex.
Yeah.
So anyone from anywhere in the world can submit to us videos of themselves having real-world sex, but we are very clear what we mean by this. We are not porn. We are not amateur. As I said, we are building this whole new category on the internet that never before existed, social sex. And so our competition isn't porn, it's Facebook and YouTube. Or rather, it would be if they allowed you to socially, sexually self-express, which they don't. And so social sex videos on Make Love Not Porn are not about performing for the camera. They are just about doing what you already do on every other social platform. Capture what goes on in the real world as it happens spontaneously in all its funny, messy, glorious, silly, beautiful, wonderful, ridiculous humanness. We curate to make sure of that. You know, I designed Make Love Not Porn around human curation. Our curators watch every single video submitted from beginning to end. We don't publish unless it's real. And we have a revenue sharing business model. Our members pay to subscribe, rent, and stream social sex videos. Half the income goes to our contributors, whom we call our Make Love Not Porn stars.
Wow. Okay. So I got questions.
Sure.
So I know, and I heard you mention somewhere else, I don't remember what it was that at some point you were finding it very strange that you were running up against funding for this. that there was some difficulty in that. Have you gotten around that problem, or what's the pushback on it?
No, and in fact, the problem, David, is broader than that. And so this is the one thing that I did not realize when I embarked on this venture, that I and my team would need to fight a huge battle every single day to build it, essentially because every piece of business infrastructure any other tech startup just takes for granted, we can't, because the small print always says no adult content. And this is all pervasive across every single area of the business in ways that people outside this sphere don't realize. It's not just that I can't get funded, I can't get banked. It took me 4 years to find one bank here in America that would allow me to open a business bank account for Make Love Not Porn. Our biggest operational challenge is payments. PayPal won't work with adult content. Stripe can't. Mainstream credit card processors won't. Every tech service I need to use to operate my platform, hosting, encoding, encrypting, the terms of service always say no adult content. We had to build our entire video sharing, video stream platform from scratch ourselves as proprietary technology because existing streaming services will not stream adult content. Even something as apparently simple as finding an email partner to send our membership emails out with. MailChimp won't work with adult content. We were rejected by 6 or 7 till we found SendGrid who would. And so every single thing is a battle. In fact, I regularly say to my team, the single biggest thing we have to celebrate at Make Love Not Porn is that we're still here. Because the business world and the tech world have been trying to shut us down since we opened.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of begs the question, how does a company like Pornhub pull it off then?
Sure. So something that people don't realize is that, a monopoly exists in the porn industry that would not be allowed to exist anywhere else. It's just that nobody ever wants to go into the porn industry and examine this. But the porn industry is dominated by one enormous company called MindGeek. MindGeek owns everything. MindGeek owns Pornhub, YouPorn, RedTube, Sex.com, Met.com, Men.com, etc., etc. When you operate at that scale, and when you have that much cash flow to play with, you'd be amazed who's willing to work with you without letting people know that they do. The rest of us have to struggle in the way that I've described.
And if unless I've heard wrong, that changed with technology, right? So like when Vivid Entertainment was really big in the porn industry, when MindGeek came around, they brought they brought the technology to be able to do it online, and that took it out of the VHS realm, and that all of that changed then. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be frank, the dynamics are exactly the same in every other industry. The porn industry is suffering from the same syndrome as the music industry.
Yeah.
The flood of free content online destroyed their old world order business model. They haven't invented a new one.
Okay. All right. So let me switch this a little bit. What do we currently, 2019, are you finding it that we're having more conversations about sex than we did 20 years ago, or less as a society?
So here's the entertaining thing about what you've just asked me, David, because it's very similar to, I get asked the same thing all the time by journalists. And they usually ask this question at the end of an interview. And the journalist will say something to me like, "So, Cindy, when do you think all of this will change? When do you think we'll be less repressed about sex?" And this is the point at which I start laughing. And I say to the journalist, "I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the way you asked that question." And again, the way you ask that question is no reflection on you, because this is how society teaches us to think. But you made the mistake of asking that question in the passive tense. All of this changes when you and I and everyone else make it change, and I don't wait for things to change, I make them change. And so in the 10 years that I've been working on Make Love Not Porn, I am absolutely seeing things improve, but that's because I'm making them improve. Right. And everybody else working with me, who has a sex positive venture, who has a sex tech startup, we are all working to do the same thing, to change the world through sex and to break these barriers down. And so absolutely, over time, I'm seeing that happen. But for me, it's not happening nearly fast enough. And so I'm constantly working to make it happen faster.
Okay, so let me see if I can ask the question a little bit differently then. We're in an age where, in some cases, it's becoming dangerous to talk about sex. We've got the whole Me Too movement going on, which I'm not against in any way. I think that abhorrent behavior needs to stop across all realms of interaction. But I will say that I know people that are afraid to have the conversation with women. I know men, I should say, that are afraid to have the conversation with women because of the lanes that it has gone down over the last several years, when men have been struggling to actually come out and try to be more communicative. And of course, this is also in a lot of the circles that I'm in, because I'm in the self-improvement industry. So people really strive to have better conversations with people and be more open and honest about that. But so do you see that there is a fear behind it that otherwise would not be there?
So I have two responses to that question, David. The first one is, I would urge you, if you haven't already done so, and all your listeners, to go to YouTube and to find my 2019 3% conference keynote called The Future for White Men in Advertising.
Okay.
And in this talk...
say that. What is it? One more time. Say
right.
That.
The title of the talk is The Future for White Men in Advertising.
Okay.
And everything I say in that talk applies to the future for white men in every industry. And I go through 7 points that characterize the future for white men in advertising. And point number 1 is, you will be able to make jokes about sex in the office. And I explain what I mean by that. So I tell the audience this anecdote. I was at a dinner last year with a number of advertising industry colleagues. And in the course of the dinner, because it was relevant to the topic in this discussion, one of the women at this dinner told us about how she'd been at a client meeting and the senior client had walked into the room and turned out to be a surprisingly attractive older man. And this woman, nudged her female colleague and went, "Wow, I do that." And we all laughed. Okay. A little later in the dinner, the male industry colleague sitting next to me said to me, "If I had told that story with the genders reversed about me and a female client, you would all have been offended." And what I said to him was, it's not about sex, it's about power. And in my talk, I quote a brilliant piece that the author Lindy West wrote several years ago, when a number of men were criticizing women for expressing appreciation of male physiques in Olympic athletes, but back when the Olympics was going on. Yeah. And so Lindy West wrote this piece where she said, I will absolutely go to the mat against male objectification when the following 3 conditions are met. Number 1, when objectification of men's bodies threatens their careers and derails their ambitions, because that is not the case, where it is with us. Number 2, when objectification of male bodies puts men in danger and fear every single day, which it doesn't, but it does with women, because we are taught to fear rape and sexual assault every single day. And number 3, when it is not being used disingenuously by men as a reason to shut women down. Okay, there is no such thing as reverse objectification. But the point being that when we have equality of opportunity for everybody, when we are gender equal in every area of business and society, everybody can make jokes about sex and talk about sex and nobody will be offended. Okay, so that's my first response. Okay. My second response is, I wrote a piece for the Daily Telegraph in the UK several years ago on why bringing sex into the office is the way forward for business. And what I meant by that was the reason that Me Too has exposed this horrific, endemic, systemic culture of sexual harassment in every single industry and every single environment is actually because of precisely what Make Love Not Porn is looking to address. Okay, so when I say to people that Make Love Not Porn has this very simple mission to make it easier for everyone in the world to talk about sex, because we do not do that currently, people don't get how massively, profoundly, societally transformative that would be. And what I mean by that is, I designed Make Love Not Porn around my own beliefs and philosophies, one of which is that everything in life, and business, by the way, starts with you and your values. So I regularly ask people this question: what are your sexual values? And nobody can ever answer me because we're not taught to think like that. Our parents bring us up to have good manners, a work ethic, sense of responsibility, accountability. Nobody ever brings us up to behave well in bed. But they should, because in bed, values like empathy, sensitivity, generosity, kindness, honesty, respect are as important as those values are in every other area of our lives where we are actively taught to exercise them. Mm-hmm. And that is why what we are doing at Make Love Not Porn could not be more relevant in the era of Me Too. Because right now, quite rightly, everybody is talking about consent. Everybody's writing about consent. Here's the problem. Nobody knows what consent actually looks like in bed. Nothing educates people as to what is great consensual communicative sex, good sexual values and good sexual behavior, like watching people actually having that kind of sex.
Right.
And Make Love Not Porn is the only place on the internet you can do that. Every one of our videos is an object lesson in consent, communication, good sexual values and behavior. We are literally education through demonstration. And so the point I made in my piece for The Telegraph about why we need to bring sex into the office was the only way you end Me Too, the only way you end rape culture is by inculcating in society and openly talked about, understood, promoted, and very importantly, aspired to, aspirational gold standard of what constitutes good sexual values and good sexual behavior. And so I tell CEOs and leaders that if you want to end Me Too in your company, you need to do two things, okay? The first is make every single level of your company gender equal. And the reason for that is that sexual harassment magically disappears in environments that are 50-50 male-female, or ideally, because it's been the other way around for too long, more female than male. Because in gender equal environments, you no longer have the implicit bro endorsement, it's okay for men to behave like that you get in male-dominated environments.
Yep.
And also in gender equal environments, when you therefore have men interacting every day with women all around them as professional equals, when you have men exposed every single day to women's brilliance, intelligence, insights, and ideas in a professional context, men cease to see women in one of only two roles, girlfriend or secretary. Okay, that's the first thing to do. The second thing to do is to then talk about sexual values in the same way you talk about all the other values that make up your culture. And so that's what I mean by having an openly talked about gold standard of what constitutes the good sexual values and good sexual behavior you expect in the office. Because nobody ever talks about this as part of their working office culture. And so when you absolutely talk about sex in the office openly, talk about here are expectations of our employees, here is the culture that we are building within this company, and anyone who goes against that should not be working here, and we'll make an example of them if they do. When you are open about sexual values as much as the rest of your values, that is when you drive good sexual values and good sexual behavior. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. In my company, it is part of the conversation of hire when we hire someone, because we openly have conversations about sex with our clients because of what we deal with in their personal lives, with them wanting to become better people, overcome things from their past, trauma, and become successful in business. So I had never heard the term sexual values, so I heard you say it in a video, and I thought that is absolutely brilliant. But let me tell you what came to my mind when you said it. I was thinking to myself, is that right? Is that correct? Is that correct for me? And then I thought, you know something, not only is it correct, it was a double standard, because I was raised by my mother and father. You treat a woman like a lady. You're a gentleman, right? But then every guy that I've ever met when I was growing up, that is not how they talked about him sexually in the locker room.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, David.
Yeah. Bar. The
absolutely.
Conversation was totally different.
Yep.
So without any real sexual conversation happening from the proper authority figures as a child is growing up, like I grew up in the late 60s, 70s, and it was find your dad's Playboy or your friend's father's or whatever. And you would get information through that. And then a lot of the bullshit that you hear from the guys that didn't do what they say that they did, but they made it sound like they did. And then you learn over a period of time in relationships, having sexual relationships with people, when somebody says no, what that actually means and whether or not you're going to abide by that and what the character of your own sexual values are. So I not only do I agree with it, I think it's definitely a two-way street when it comes to what they are taught as far as sexual values. It's not just that they don't have them, it's that they're taught something completely different to what's appropriate in society, as what a good person would be.
Yep.
Where do you so that's how we handle this. That's how we handle this in business. How does the individual take this into a sex positive conversation in their personal life, in their families? How do we deal with this with children?
Sure. So, and again, by the way, David, this is why Make Love Not Porn exists, because people need external prompts to talk about sex as a springboard to then
Good
be
point.
able to take the conversation forward. And we are that prompt. So what I say to parents, and by the way, I have a, expansion of Make Love Not Porn that is what I call the Khan Academy of Sex Education that I've been trying to get funded for 5 years and failing to, because no one will invest, which would actually be a tool for parents to use in this context. But what I say to parents is two things. The first is that you cannot begin talking to your child about sex too early. And when I say that, I don't mean literally talk about sex. What I mean is the very first time they ask where babies come from or they touch their genitals, the most important thing isn't even what you say as much as how you say it. Never, ever get flustered, never get visibly embarrassed, never get annoyed, never shut them up, never slap them down. Instead, just answer them calmly, straightforwardly, and truthfully. And you will open up a channel of communication that will be there between you for the rest of their lives, and you want that to be the case. And then secondly, I say to parents, and today, when you talk to your child about sex as early as possible, you must now also talk to your child about porn. Because the average age at which a child is first exposed to porn today is 8 years old. And in fact, a global study done 6 years ago now by the ISP Bitdefender indicated then that age had dropped to 6. And this is absolutely not because 8-year-olds and 6-year-olds go looking for porn. They don't. It's a function of the digital world we live in today. This is utterly inevitable, can't be prevented. They will stumble across it.
Yeah.
It's what somebody shows your child on a cell phone in the playground, what happens when they go out the neighbor's house, or they're Googling something innocent and something pops up. So it's a lot easier to talk to your child about porn than most parents think. So what I say to your parents is, so when you have the conversation about sex, what you then do, and you dial this up or down depending on, the age of the child, but you say some variation of this. You go, darling, so we've just talked about sex, and you know how together we watch movies and videos and cartoons where things happen that aren't real. Well, there are also movies and videos about sex, and they're not real either. And because of that, they can be quite confusing. And so we'd rather you did not watch them till you're older. But if anybody ever shows you something like that, or you come across it, come and talk to us, we can explain it. That's all you have to say. But by saying that, you've done two very important things. The first is that you have set up in their heads, for when they come across porn, that it's not real. And second, you have encouraged them to come and talk to you about it. And believe me, you will want them to come and talk to you about it, because what they may stumble across is likely to be utterly traumatizing.
Right. Well, I think the other thing that you remove is the shame.
Absolutely.
Children aren't born with shame. They're taught
exactly.
shame. So, and then it's self-replicating for the rest of their life once they've been introduced to it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Again, brilliant. If you were to say, how would a person sit down, an average adult who's never heard this before, and they're intrigued by the idea of sexual values, how would they sit down and say, how do I create sexual values?
Well, to be honest, I would recommend starting that by joining Make Love Not Porn and watching our videos, and watching good sexual values in action, because, that in itself is a revelation. And we hear this from, our members write to us every day and write amazing emails. But also because, and I love what, one couple, wrote a fantastic guest blog post about their experience. They've been members of Make Love Not Porn for 3 years. What they said was, we made it so much easier for them to talk to each other about their own sex life because watching our videos normalized the conversation. It became like talking about things you see on TV or Netflix. It just makes the conversations natural and normal. And that's the best possible starting point, whether you are engaging in this dialogue with a partner or whether you're engaging in it with yourself. Because, we got an amazing email last year from a man who said, I've just had what I think is my first ever entirely guilt-free sexual experience watching your videos. And he said, it's a real shame it was only with me, because I'm single at the moment.
Right.
But literally, it was the first time he'd ever felt good about himself and his sexuality. So start by watching our videos, and those will prompt your own thought process and any conversation you want to have around it.
I tell people all the time that they should check out Make Love Not Porn.
Good. I'm so glad.
I can't tell you how brilliant I think that it is. And when I first heard about it, I was like, why hasn't somebody thought of this before? That's absolutely crazy. Like, it's so obvious. It's like everybody misses it because I think in their mind they relate it to porn, but you're right. It's not porn.
No. And also, David, so the interesting thing is, when I speak at tech conferences, I say to the audience, I'm going to ask you to do something nobody else has ever asked you to do. Start a sex tech venture. Because this is the area nobody's encouraged to be an entrepreneur in. That's one reason why, more people aren't doing this. And incidentally, I have to tell you, because I love this quote. So several years ago, because I support myself alongside as a bootstrapping entrepreneur, I pay the bills through paid consulting and public speaking. And so I was asked to interview Larry Flint, the founder of Hustler, on stage as the opening session for a big entertainment conference in LA a few years ago. Okay. So I was in the green room with Larry, and actually we got on like a house on fire. He was terrific. So I was running through my questions with him in the green room. And one of the questions I wanted to ask him was, Larry, you pioneered in a sector where nobody is ever encouraged to pioneer. And I was going to go on and say to him, what would you say to entrepreneurs today to encourage them to do the same thing? But he stopped me and he said, I never saw myself as a pioneer because I just didn't think I was doing anything wrong. And I loved that response. That's exactly the attitude.
Yes. That's brilliant. I was not expecting that, but yes. Okay. One last question that's very important. You are very self-assured. You're very self-aware. How did you get there? Is that all? You've always been there, or did you decide, or how did you do that?
Right. So, I'm regularly asked some version of this question, David. And first of all, I started life as rampantly insecure as the rest of us, especially as a woman. As women, from the moment we're born, we are made to feel insecure about absolutely everything to do with ourselves. The way we look, the way we talk, the way we dress, the way, nice girls do this, nice girls don't do that. We spend the rest of our lives coming back from that, and some of us never do. And so I always say that the single best moment of my life, and this was not a moment per se, it was a gradual realization, but the best moment of my life was the day that I realized that I no longer give a damn what anybody thinks, because that is the only way to live your life. Yeah. And, that realization came about through, now, to, the age I am today, 59 years of living. But I want to shortcut that process for everyone else. And so, two things. A, don't give a damn what anybody else thinks. And B, what I am doing is I am living my own values. I'm living my own philosophies. I am living my life and working my work according to my values. And when you're doing that, that just really guides you as to what you should be doing, and everything else is irrelevant.
That's amazing. So if you could leave everybody with a successful mind tip, what would it be?
Oh, I mean, it literally would be, don't give a damn what anybody else thinks. Fear of what other people will think is the single most paralyzing dynamic in business and in life. You will never own the future if you care what other people think.
Yeah, agreed. Cindy, thank you so much. Make love not porn.com. Anywhere else that they could go. How if somebody wants to help you in funding, are you taking donations? Are you taking any help?
Absolutely. So we are actually excitingly just about to relaunch Make Love Not Porn. We've re-engineered the site and redesigned it to make it work better. And in fact, we are hoping to relaunch it within the next week or so. So by the time this goes out, we should be there, hopefully. And in that context, people who would like to support us can, please join Make Love Not Porn and subscribe. We have different levels of subscription. B, because a number of people have asked if they can do this, we are adding a donation capability to the site for anybody who would like to make a one-off donation or a recurring donation, because we've absolutely had people write to us and say, I'd love to be able to donate on a recurring basis to support you. And anybody who would like to fund a venture that I have very big plans for, you can email cindy@makelovenotporn.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here. It was a brilliant interview. I really appreciate you. And
absolute pleasure, David. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and like the video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section and let's continue the conversation. Have a great day.